Hello, my name is George Kuesis, and for my VMB 101V final project, I have chosen to analyze the Breaking Bad Ricin scene. I chose this because Breaking Bad is one of my favorite television series. I've watched it with my friends and have debated many of the scenes and wondered if they could possibly be true. And this is one of our favorite scenes to debate, and I think it's a great opportunity and very interesting that I'll actually be able to answer the question for real about if this could possibly happen. All right, so diving in, some situational background on Breaking Bad. In the AMC hit Breaking Bad, the protagonist Walter White, a chemistry teacher turned meth cooking drug kingpin, is seen producing a small vial of powdered ricin poison at the beginning of season 4. He explains to his protege, Jesse Pinkman, that the poison will be a perfect way of conquering their enemies quickly and discreetly, as no one will be able to trace ricin poisoning back to them. While the ricin is often teased in the same season, it is never actually utilized until the final episode. Walter reveals to Jesse that he secretly slipped into the sugar replacement package, stevia, of their white-collar methamphetamine supplier, Lydia. Lydia proceeds to dump the stevia lookalike into her tea as she does at every meeting, and later that night feels intense symptoms of flu and is very sick. The audience later hears through the radio announcement that she is in the hospital in critical condition and not expected to make it. And so in these pictures we have, at the top left, it is Lydia at their meeting with the stevia package that contains the ricin. And then on the right is about 6 hours later in Showtime, where she calls Walter White and is seen being very sick. And on the bottom, we have Walter White himself with this little powder over here is the ricin through a glass table. Several important things to notice about the situation are the length and time between when the ricin was produced and when it was used, the very small amount of ricin used, and the way Lydia ingested the poison in relation to her symptoms. Some background on ricin. Ricin is derived from the common castor bean seed and is one of the most poisonous naturally occurring substances. The most common use of castor bean is the production of castor oil, which can contain 1 to 5% of ricin toxin itself. Ricin toxin has been used for a long time as a cheap and effective poison. Its most notorious use came in 1978 when the KGB used it to assassinate a Bulgarian defector with a ricin poison needle hidden in an umbrella. The umbrella worked as a discreet dart gun, and the ricin was hidden in a pellet inside the stock of the umbrella. Once in range, the umbrella was fired, and the ricin-carrying pellet struck the defector, George Markov, with a fatal dose that took his life 4 days later. And so below is an actual picture of the umbrella used with a little diagram showing how it worked. Off to the right is the actual carrying container for the ricin. So it's the pellet, and the pellet struck the Bulgarian defector, and through these holes, ricin poison was released into the man's bloodstream, killing him 4 days later. And on top is a castor bean plant. Some physiochemical properties in the structure. Ricin's molecular weight is 65.75 kilodaltons, and it is built with 2 polypeptide chains, A and B. The A polypeptide is smaller and weighs approximately 32 kilodaltons and connects via dual sulfide linkage to the 34 kilodalton B chain, as pictured over here. Some of the routes of distribution. In accordance with the show, we will assume that the ricin toxin that is being administered is in pure crystalline form and not simply a castor bean. The route of administration of the drug is important for the degree of toxic effect felt. When the drug is inhaled or injected, the effects are exponentially more severe. Its quick spread to the bloodstream can cause cell death throughout the body, as one molecule of this deadly polypeptide can kill an entire cell. In the scene being analyzed, it shows Lydia drinking the dissolved toxin, so the oral route will be focused on. As stated, oral administration of the drug is less lethal, with an oral LD50 observed to be 1,000 times higher in mice than that of an inhalation LD50. The estimated lethal oral dose for human would be around 1 to 20 milligrams per kilogram of weight. When taken orally, the slow metabolizing poison is concentrated in the liver and spleen, with up to 45% of the toxin being excreted unmetabolized without causing any damage. The high concentration in liver and spleen is due to extraction of the toxin by first-pass metabolism. A more experiment to determine why so much bioavailability is lost via oral ingestion has not yet been completed. Some of the studies that I read about why it has not yet been completed is the fact that it would take so many lab animals to actually be poisoned and to discover, and with the sheer poisonous effect of ricin, it just was not deemed worth it. The mechanism of action. So the toxic effect of this poison is caused by deactivation of ribosomes. To gain access to a cell, the B chain of ricin, which is right here, shown right here, uses galactose binding site and binds to the exterior of a cell via glycolipids on the cell surface. Once bound, the A chain enters the cell through receptor-mediated endocytosis. The A chain can then be sent to 3 locations in the cell, degraded by lysosomes, recycled back to the cell surface, or transported to the endoplasmic reticulum. And so here you can see the ricin going into the cell, B chain connecting via galactoside bond, and the A and both of them entering via endocytosis. And there's the 3 routes being shown here. The 3 routes are shown in this picture, either excreted by the cell into a lysosome or into the ER. If the A chain reaches the ER, it can begin wreaking havoc on the cell by locating ribosomes. The A chain uses an N-glycosidase to attach, depurate, and cleave 28S ribosomal RNA located on the 60S ribosomal unit. And so this is a small subunit of the big ribosome, but a very key part. The specific cleavage disallows elongation factor 2 to bind, and in turn, this allows the cell to elongate proteins, rendering the ribosome unable to create polypeptides. Once an A chain is in position, it can deactivate 1,500 ribosomes per minute, quickly leading to necrosis of the infected area. And so you can see this is where the A chain affects loop of the 28S rRNA. And up here, this is the specific site on the whole polypeptide that the A chain will go and connect. You can see the little red dot right here that's meant to be the A chain connecting to the polypeptide, causing that disruption. Toxicity. When ingested orally, the toxic symptoms should present themselves in 4 to 6 hours. A mild oral dose of ricin will produce symptoms easily confused with food poisoning, like abdominal pain, vomiting, and diarrhea. A more severe dose of symptoms would include symptoms like liver failure, gastrointestinal bleeding, or even death. There is currently no vaccine for ricin poison, and often the symptoms are thought to be due to some other ailment, so it's hard to treat. In this picture, there's some necrosis of liver cells being shown by the arrows. Okay, so some fact checking to make sure this would actually work in the show. The toxicology checks out. The first to consider is this case is how Walter would find and make the poison. Luckily for Walter, he is a chemistry savant with access to world-class lab just outside Albuquerque, New Mexico. One of the places castor beans grow wildly. So here's a map of where castor beans grow wildly, and then right in New Mexico, right around the Albuquerque area, they do grow. So he would have access to them, and he has a really nice lab that he could use. When the ricin is first observed, it appears to be a light brown crystalline powder in a vial small enough to fit in a cigarette. The poison then is stashed away for a long period of time, only to be brought back out 9 months later in the show. This long storage should cause no problems to the poison as stored in a dry area that would not reach temperatures above 80 degrees Celsius, the temperature at which ricin is inactivated. When the poison is used, Lydia, the character being poisoned, is shown unknowingly dumping a sugar packet-sized amount into her tea, and the powder dissolving quickly. This seems to be what would happen normally, as the same amount of poison previously seen in the vial and purified ricin will dissolve readily in water. The amount of poison also seems to be accurate, as a sugar packet typically holds 4 grams of sugar, and a lethal dose of ricin occurring at 1 to 20 milligrams per kilogram would probably be a lethal dose. You never know exactly how much ricin is produced or how much Lydia weighs, but by seeing the amount of ricin poured in, it seems to be a substantial amount if this is the actual lethal dose. The biggest discrepancy in the show in the portrayal of this toxin is the symptoms that are actually portrayed by Lydia. While the correct amount of time is allowed before the onset of symptoms, the actual symptoms portrayed resemble that of a ricin inhalation poisoning rather than an oral poisoning. Lydia experiences severe flu-like symptoms like coughing and fever rather than volume depletion or gastrointestinal bleeding, which are more common in oral poisoning. And so this was the biggest discrepancy that was seen between the show and between the actual chemistry of ricin. And so Lydia, while she didn't describe her symptoms totally accurately, she did seem to have the flu. And Walt is even heard saying in the show, saying on the phone, he says, "Seems like you got the flu, huh?" And so that's the biggest discrepancy I've seen. Other than that, all the facts seem to check up, and it seems like this is actually plausible that could happen to someone. So in conclusion, I believe this is an accurate representation of a toxicant. It should be able to be manufactured easily, stored discreetly, and easily slipped into something as simple as a sugar packet. The effects would be severe even if the symptoms would not match up perfectly, and without proper diagnosis could easily be fatal. Overall, I think this further proves the greatness of the television series and the show that the writers are shows that the writers are well researched. Here are my references, and I'd like to thank you for taking the time to listen to this today. I hope you learned something new, and thanks for the fun class. Bye.